Hi, I'm Liana from Will Read for Fields, the blog that's all about reading for the emotions that you get out of the books. And I'm here today with Tessa Dare. She's a New York Times and USA Today best-selling author, and she's a Rita Award-winning author from Romance Writers of America. And she has over a dozen historical novels to her name, and I think four novellas. Is that correct? Yes, and her most recent series is Castles Ever After, and the first book in that is Romancing the Duke, and the second book is The Yes to the Marquettes, and the third one is out in a couple of months. The first question is, I think everything that you've had out so far is a historical novel. Is there a reason for that?
I suppose it's just what I like to read, so it became what I like to write. Sometimes people ask me if I'm going to write a contemporary, and I haven't felt moved to do so yet, but maybe someday. Right now, I have lots of ideas for historical, so I'm happy writing those.
But you're based out of Southern California, and your books are set in
in England.
In England,
I know.
so
Wish fulfillment, maybe. I have been able to travel to England to do some research trips, and that's a good excuse to take a trip. It does help to be able to see the places I'm writing about and investigate the locations and get inspired that way. But I think there's just always something that called to me about period romance, always appealed to me ever since I was a teenager, and I think it's just the way my brain is wired to think about romance. It has to have lots of buttons and gloves and petticoats.
But does I know that you're a librarian by training, and do you find that helps with the research, like since you don't actually live in England?
It does help with the research. However, it also can hinder the writing because sometimes I'm tempted to just research, and then I would rather keep doing research than get to the writing. I can kind of fall down a rabbit hole in the internet for a long, long time. But I do love research, and so it's not a chore for me at all.
Because one of the things I was curious about was because you do feature a lot of like unusual aspects of historical England and like the entire region, like professions that wouldn't be your normal historical
brewing, or blacksmiths,
or like archaeology.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
like I imagine like you have to check like what are like at what point the science is.
When was this discovered?
When you're setting your novel.
Yeah. That's kind of part of the fun of it, though. I learn a lot that way. I do. I like to give, especially my heroines, I like to give them interesting interests and professions, and even if they're outside the norm for historical women of the time, because, it's interesting, and there actually were, at all times through history, there have been women doing these interesting things, making discoveries, owning and running their own businesses. They just didn't always get written about in the same way that the men did. So I love historical romance because it's kind of a chance to write some of those stories that didn't get written down. And not that I'm saying that they're exactly true to life, but the women, strong women, have always existed and always flourished. So it's something that's kind of important to me, to write women who do things and men who do things as well. And I think I would get a little bored if I were only writing London ballrooms. I like to range a little wider and explore different areas of the country and different professions as well.
Well, that's part of why I love your books, because the heroines are misses, but they're not missish. So I guess you'd
Well
say.
said.
I was wondering, do you deliberately look for things for your heroines to do that are out of the ordinary, or does it start with just like, what if I had a person who did this, that kind of thing?
A little both, but definitely I look to give my female characters strong personalities and interests. And sometimes they don't have to be scholarly or business interests. Sometimes I've written heroines who just have a particular interest in crafting or art, something that was typically considered ladylike at the time, but they have a passion for it. It's more than just like a hobby or a pastime for them, because everybody has an interest. To me, they're not a fully fleshed character, somebody who's interesting to spend time with if they don't have any interests aside from drinking tea and sitting and talking. So my rule of thumb is that I try to write characters that you would want to invite to a dinner party. Like, they have interesting things to say, they have stories to tell, experiences to share, and they don't just kind of sit there and smile.
Is that why you tend to deviate from the usual debutante that you see in a lot of other historical novels set in that period, which is, I guess, Regency Georgian period?
Yeah.
Because I think Kate was a barmaid.
Oh yeah, she was like a serving girl in a tavern.
Yeah.
Well, for that one, that was Pauline. Yeah, I wanted that strong contrast between the Duke, at the pinnacle of society, and someone who came from a very low position, so she could really have that sort of Cinderella experience. But for her, her satisfaction was not only in putting on a pretty dress and being accepted in society. She had goals of her own. She wanted to open her own little library. She wanted to help her family. So it is important to me that all the characters have goals, the men and the women, and to let them do some of the things in fiction that maybe they didn't get credit for doing in the history books.
Do you feel like writing as a historical romance author now allows you more freedom to pursue those kinds of characters? Because, say, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, most of the heroines were more of the usual ballroom.
Yeah, some of them were, but then you also had people, pirates and Sky O'Malley, out there running her own pirate ship and things like that. So there've always been, I think, in romance, there's always in historical romance, there's always been an interesting mix between adventure and domesticity, maybe for lack of a better word, But I do like to, and not all my women are like career girl type things, but they like to take their own initiative. I like it to write a heroine who will go after what she wants, even if she makes mistakes trying to get it. She doesn't wait for things to happen to her. She initiates her own plans. So she doesn't just because I really just find it hard to write a character who wants something but doesn't take steps to get it. So what do they do? I don't know. That's my problem. So maybe that's why I write women who are go-getters, because I just don't know what to do with them otherwise.
But I did notice that the whole Captain of My Fate heroine is a recurring theme with you.
Yeah, it is, and I do think it's becoming more common. It's a little bit historical romance has become more feminist, so we have a more progressive take now on the past than we might have had a few decades ago.
And sometimes I notice also you touch on certain societal taboos, homosexuality or I think the Stud Club was the first time I read about what it was like back then. So I found that really interesting, and I was wondering how you touched on that, or what inspired you to actually go there to those topics.
I think it's like I was saying about, strong women have always existed, and so have gay people. There have always been gay people, and there have always been some who, were accepted by their family, and always have been some who might not have been or might have had a harder time. So I think I'm conscious of the fact that I'm writing a lot of heterosexual relationships. Obviously, like all my books are strictly about man and a woman getting together, but I like to acknowledge the fact that that's not everyone's happy ending, because there are different kinds of attraction and different kinds of love. So even though straight romance is what I write, I just and that those are the stories I'm telling, I hope to just acknowledge that other stories are going on, other kinds of love stories are also happening.
Okay, and then I was wondering, because your series are so different from one another. Like with the Stud Club, that, well, the horse, the horse ownership, and then with Spindle Cove, you basically have women who are kind of banished to Spindle Cove, reclaiming themselves, I guess. So I was wondering, how much time do you take in crafting each little universe?
That's a good question. I think Spindle Cove in particular, the idea came out of just kind of, what about a town where it's all women? And then I think there's a line in Pride and Prejudice, the militia come to town, and it just sort of changes everything in their little Meryton town. All the girls are all aflutter, and so I was kind of thinking about that. Like, there's a town that's all women, and then suddenly there's a militia in town, and how would that change things? But then I kind of decided, where I wanted to set it after doing some research. Okay, where might this have happened? And then I went to the area in England that was planning to set it and did some research, thought about, the kinds of places that are in these little towns and the sort of history that they have. There's these crumbling castles from the Normans, and there are these little tea shops, and there are, it just sort of used that to create the characters and the world. And then with the Castles Ever After, again, it just kind of came from a little idea of what could change a woman's life in a
kind
huge
of like
way.
A posthumous fairy godfather.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's like, here's a castle. I think it came out of watching a lot of HGTV. I don't know if you have that channel. There's home and garden television, lots of home renovation shows. And home is important to us. We all need a place to live. So, and home ownership was really unusual for a woman in that time. So I knew that that the idea of being suddenly presented with property would change a woman's life, and it was kind of a cool thing to be able to write about and explore some different places and different locales that I hadn't got a chance. For example, Scotland. I always wanted to write a Scottish hero since I grew up on Julie Garwood, so I finally got a chance to write one.
Okay. So I wanted to ask about the different worlds that not really worlds, but the different groups that you've set your series in. And do you have one that's particularly near and dear to your heart?
Well, I think I definitely have a lot of love for Spindle Cove, for that series, and I'm planning to kind of return to some of the characters in my next few works. So there are some characters that people have been asking for stories for. So Charlotte, for example, she's going to be the heroine of the book that I'm writing now. So definitely looking for ways to kind of visit that town and those people, those characters again. I have a lot of fun with them.
Do you have characters who you feel are kind of representative of you or people you know in your life? You don't have to mention any names.
No. That's okay. I mean, there definitely have been, especially like side characters that I particularly model on people that I might know or relationships that I've seen, but never like too directly. Just a little hint of inspiration here and there. But as far as for me, of course, every character, every heroine has to have a little bit of yourself in it, because otherwise you can't really write them. But I think I probably identify most with, it's probably three. There's probably Minerva, because she's in A Week to Be Wicked. She's kind of the bookish girl, the nerdy girl, and that was total, geek girl fulfillment there,
That was my favorite one.
Aw, thanks, good. We're not really supposed to admit to having favorites. It was one of my favorites to write, and I love calling her Minerva, and so writing Charlotte's story, I'm already like, I get to write Colin and Minerva in this book. Like, it's just always fun to write. So I definitely put a lot of myself in her. I put a lot of myself in Pauline, because she wanted to be a librarian, and I was a librarian. So there was definitely things of me and her, like especially like smelling the books, that kind of thing. And Izzy from Romancing the Duke, I think, because she's a writer, and she definitely a lot of my own angst and joys and whatnot went into her.
Honestly, Minerva's my number one, and Izzy's my number two.
Oh, thanks.
So that gives me like little bits of hearing that.
I'm so glad. It's funny. It's like usually my favorites tend to be the readers' favorites too. Like some writers say like their most favorite book is like the one that nobody likes, and vice versa. But I don't know. For some reason, I think when you're really enjoying writing something, or it comes to you kind of more easily, then it sort of comes through in the writing, and at least that's my experience.
One thing I really appreciated about reading your books was how much humor you put into. Like, it was just light and fun.
Thanks.
Was that something that came naturally to you, or was it something you struggled with?
I think it just comes naturally to me to sort of see the humorous side of things. I don't really take anything, including myself, too seriously. So, I don't make fun of anybody more than I would make fun of myself, that's for sure. And I think it's just natural when it comes to love in particular. There's a lot of absurdity in love. It makes you do sort of crazy things, and it really does make you trip and fall, or your heart skip a beat, or you get flushed. All of those funny things. They come from life. I'm such a klutz. I'm always dropping things or stumbling or whatever the case may be. So I kind of live it, so I put it in my books. I mean, on one of my very first dates with my husband, we were walking together and holding hands, and he changed direction while I was looking the other way, and he pulled me into a pole.
Oh, no.
Seriously, so like that, it's like the most slapstick thing ever, but it happened, and I still married him. He had an ice pack in his back, but it's like he planned it. Like, what do you mean? He's just a Boy Scout. He just always has an ice pack. I don't know. He says now that was his plan, to damage my judgment, and then I have to marry him. So, yeah, it's the humor and the craziness of life. I just enjoy putting it into love stories, because I feel like it belongs there. And also, those were the kind of stories I enjoyed reading. Like, did we talk about Julie Garwood?
Yes.
Yeah, like that. She's one of my favorites, and she really made me love historical romance. And at a time when a lot of writers were writing these sort of angsty historicals with lots of tortured, characters and kidnappings and really like dark themes, she was kind of wrote these historicals that were just sort of light and charming and funny and heartfelt and warm, and that I was really drawn to those as a reader, and so I think I kind of tend to adopt the same sort of philosophy of tending toward the lighthearted. Not that I don't feel like there's a place for the darker, and I know a lot of readers love that darker kind of emotion as well. So it's great that there's all ends of the spectrum, but I tend to be toward the lighter side.
Okay, so we know that when a Scott ties the knot is coming out in August,
yes.
Right? And that's going to be the conclusion of Castles Ever After?
I think so, yeah. I wasn't really sure when I started the series how many books there would be. So, I wrote these three, and then now I'm like writing Charlotte's story is really calling to me. So that's what I'm going to write next. I don't, whether there would be another Castles book, I'm not sure. We'll see. We'll see where the series lands. I mean, some of the characters from it might show up again. Side characters, maybe.
So we can definitely expect Return to Spindle Cove.
Yes. Definitely working on that.
And I don't know if you can hint or anything. Do you have any new series planned?
Right now, I have I want to write the book for Charlotte, and I think I'm going to write at least one novella that's touches on Spindle Cove as well. And from there, I'm not quite sure. We'll see.
Okay, and then just one thing, like one last thing, I guess. Like we know a lot of readers who will just run past, like just devour all your books and say they've read through. I think it's 13 books so far, and then the 4 novellas. Do you have anybody like you'd recommend for people who are fans of yours that you'd like to recommend?
Well, yes, definitely. I think if you really like strong women in your historicals, I would recommend authors like Courtney Milan. And, well, I mean, there are a lot of writers with strong women, so I don't want to say anybody I'm not mentioning doesn't write strong women. But anyway, I think people like Courtney Milan, Elizabeth Hoyt writes really wonderful historicals. Sarah MacLean, she writes really lovely historicals, of course, as well. Then there's some newer authors, like I think about like Teresa Romaine. She writes some beautiful historicals. Right now, I just read a novella by Alyssa Cole, and I'm starting her full length. She writes historical romance that's interracial, and I loved the novella that I read from her, and now I'm starting her historical that's between set in the Highlands with obviously not an African American heroine because she's not American at all, but a heroine of African descent and Scottish hero. So I'm really excited about that. It's like something, different. If you like trying different locations and different kinds of characters that aren't just the same ballroom myths.
And then what about our readers who are new to your work? Do you have books that you think definitely would be a great introduction to the Tessa Dare collection, I guess?
Even though it's not the first book in the series, I usually tell people to read A Week to Be Wicked, because it tends to be the book that gets people to read the rest. So I usually give A Week to Be Wicked, or if you want something shorter, I wrote a novella called The Scandalous, Dissolute, No Good Mr. Right. Just remember Mr. Right with a W. And that's a little novella that's not connected to any of my series, but it gives kind of a good idea of what my style is like, and I really like that story. It was a lot of fun to write.
Okay, thank you. And can I invite you to, invite our readers to check out your books and attend your book signing?
Yes, please. So I'll be at Powerbooks tomorrow. That'll maybe June 27th. We'll just go with dates. Saturday, June 27th at 3 p.m. I think the registration starts earlier, 11 a.m. I believe, but the event starts at 3, and there'll be chat and book signing, and I'm just really, really excited to meet some readers in person. I know that there are some people I've been corresponding with on Twitter and Facebook who are attending. Excited to meet them. Even if there's somebody I haven't met, I'm excited to meet you. And I expect it to be a great time.
And where can they follow you for news on your new books that are coming out, and just basically updates on what's going on with you?
Well, I'm on social media. I'm more active on Twitter. I'm at Tessa Dare, all one word. I'm also on Facebook, and it's facebook.com/Tessa Dare author, all one word. And if you go to my website, tessadare.com, you can subscribe to my email newsletter, and then that way you're always going to notice if there's a new book out or some big news. That's pretty much the best ways. Or send me an email.
So you do like getting emails from
I do.
readers?
I get sometimes behind on answering them, especially if I'm on deadline or traveling or something like that. But I love them. I really do love hearing from readers, and I do eventually reply, even if it takes me a little longer sometimes. So I am always glad to have reader emails.
Hi, so that was our interview with Tessa Dare, a historical romance author extraordinaire. And for more interviews with authors, plus book reviews, we do a lot of book lists and other features. Please check out our blog. That's willreadforfeels.com. And follow us on Facebook. That's just facebook.com/willreadforfeels. Follow us on Twitter as well. That's at WillRead4. That's number 4 Fields. And subscribe to our YouTube channel where you'll see more of our interviews, event coverages, and our monthly podcast.